There are these beautiful, lush, hanging baskets with big purple flowers all along the main drag in the little hamlet of Russell. I admire them every time I drive by. And I give a silent tribute to whoever plants them, hangs them, waters them, plucks off the deadheads. There are countless people all around the North Country who maintain our public spaces. We meet a group of them that's been doing it for more than a century. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Claxton Hepburn Medical Center, dedicated to providing patient care and regional services to the people of St. Lawrence County. claxtonhepburn.org.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Thursday, September 21st. First up, yesterday, Governor Kathy Hochul signed into law a measure to make it easier for New Yorkers to access mail-in voting. And some New York Republicans, led by North Country Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, have filed a lawsuit to overturn it. Karen DeWitt has more.
Hochul, speaking at New York Law School, says all registered voters will now be able to request a mail-in ballot up to 10 days prior to Election Day. The ballots will come with postage-paid return envelopes, and they must be mailed back by Election Day and must be received by the local boards of election no later than 7 days after voting. Hochul says it will make voting easier for average working New Yorkers, who might have to juggle jobs and caring for children and perhaps elderly parents as well.
But today we're going to right the wrong of the past and say it's finally time that people can vote by mail. We saw it work during the pandemic. We can do this. And we know that every day people are so busy. I just described what a day is like. And it's just, why not?
Hochul says we can't take the continuation of democracy for granted. She points to the January 6th storming of the Capitol in Washington, which left 5 dead, and she accused some Republicans of engineering a sinister, slow-motion insurrection. She says the U.S. Supreme Court gutted the Federal Voting Rights Act a decade ago, and 29 states have passed voter suppression laws.
As we're seeing all across America, the right to vote is literally under attack. I could not have imagined as a child that I'd be standing here as an adult having to say we have to fight to defend the right to vote in America. It is shocking.
Republicans in New York, led by Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, have filed a lawsuit looking to overturn the law. They say that by signing the bill, Hochul is repudiating the will of the voters of New York. In 2021, voters rejected an amendment to the state's constitution. It would have lifted restrictions in place for absentee voting and enacted no excuses mail-in voting. Stefanik, in a statement, says mail-in voting is less secure and that it unfairly benefits the Democratic Party, which she says is trying to destroy what is left of the election integrity in New York. Democrats argue that the law is constitutional because it allows mail-in voting only for early voting, not for Election Day. Senate sponsor, Deputy Majority Leader Mike Gianaris, says opponents are trying to suppress the vote.
It will be opposed by people who don't want people to vote.
Hochul also signed measures that would create same-day registration on the first day of early voting. Local jails will now be required to provide voter registration information to those who are being released from custody, and more comprehensive training will be conducted for poll workers. Hochul also signed a law establishing the date of New York's presidential primary. It will be April 2nd, 2024. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
The village of Saranac Lake is launching a pilot program that will make Uber rides more affordable for some residents. Lucy Grindon reports.
Starting on October 2nd, Saranac Lake will cover half the cost of all Uber rides within 20 miles of village limits for eligible people. Those who live on low incomes, have disabilities, or are 60 years old or over. Franklin County does have a public bus system, but only 3 bus routes operate in Saranac Lake. Mayor Jimmy Williams says getting around is a challenge for a lot of people.
The biggest thing is frequency and location, right? We're so spread out up here that if you get dropped off at Newberry's parking lot to get to a doctor's appointment is pretty tough.
To get the discounted rides, eligible people will apply for the program online.
We're going to do our best to have an on your honor system, but if it's being abused, then we'll have to start verifying.
After the village approves applicants, they'll receive special voucher codes.
And so you open up your Uber app and you put in your voucher number and it costs half the normal price. So whether it's to pick up a sick kid from school or get to the grocery store or get to work or whatever. It's going to allow people easier movement in the area.
The pilot program will last for 6 months. It'll let the village gauge demand for rides and see what the most requested routes are. One possible hurdle for the program is a scarcity of drivers. There are only a few currently working in the village.
Right now, the demand for Uber is low, so the drivers are very few and far between. And so I think with the increased demand, we will have an increased number of folks interested in driving Uber. And so the rest of the community will be able to open an app and actually see 1 or 2 vehicles that they could ask for a ride.
The village has budgeted $20,000 to pay for the pilot program. After it's over, Williams says the village may apply for grant funding to continue the service. Lucy Grindon, North Country Public Radio.
The New York State Thruway Authority unanimously approved increasing tolls on the roadway by 5% next year and by another 5% in 2027. The authority's chief financial officer, David Malone, said the increases come after several public hearings. Malone said even with the increases, toll rates on the Thruway will remain among the lowest in the nation. He said providing a safe and reliable highway requires significant and sustained capital investment.
The money needed to make these capital investments comes almost exclusively from tolls. The authority does not receive any dedicated federal or state funding.
Thruway officials note that 75% of the bridges on the Thruway are over 60 years old. The toll increases will help preserve and rebuild that infrastructure. In small communities, volunteer organizations do a lot. Think of volunteer ambulances, volunteer-run thrift stores and food banks, volunteer drivers for the elderly. In Saranac Lake, a volunteer group has been beautifying the village for 113 years. Amy Feiereisel caught up with a few members of the Village Improvement Society as they trimmed a tree downtown.
Vest Pocket Park is next to the library in Saranac Lake. It's got flowers, some benches, a big tree in the back. It's one of 6 parks that the Village Improvement Society owns. Each one is managed by a board member. This park's shepherd is Roger Steinbrook.
I'm the park manager for the past 10, 15 years, so I dedicate myself to take care of the flowers that come out during the spring and summer.
He also tends to several flower gardens around town, including a World War I memorial garden. But today, Steinbrook has thick gloves on, and he's loading tree branches onto a trailer.
Today we are pruning the big Norway maple that's overgrown itself.
Doing the actual cutting is the president of the Village Improvement Society, Randall Swanson. He's hanging from the maple tree. He's wearing a red harness and is tied into 2 different branches.
You have to stay safe, and you don't want to spike the tree because that could harm it. So we actually use ropes, like a lot of rock climbing techniques, so that I can climb around in the tree.
Swanson teaches arboriculture and landscape management at Paul Smith's.
And rather than hiring somebody to do the work today, we volunteers got together to prune the tree. We had to get the branches up off these benches and off the building.
They've been at it for a few hours, and Swanson is headed back up to make one last cut on a branch he missed. He works his way up the tree by cranking on an ascender.
A lot of grunting when you do this work, right? Okay.
Then he positions himself and moves a couple ropes, aided by another volunteer, Tom Long.
Tom, hold on.
Yep.
We're going to tie that on over on this side.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't bounce through the crown of the tree.
Yep.
Untie that just for a second.
Yep.
We're going to pull this rope all the way through to this side.
Long is a recent and enthusiastic volunteer.
Because I love gardens, and I love what the village is doing for their village. I just grew up, tending my family gardens, and my grandfather was a gardener. And
Long is retired, and he moved to Saranac Lake from Syracuse last year.
like the first day I got here, I noticed all these parks. And I saw the sign. It said Village Improvement Society, and it gave a website, said I wanted to volunteer, and I started, and I haven't stopped.
Long ties an electric chainsaw to a rope, and Swanson pulls it up and starts cutting. There are about 20 people involved in the Village Improvement Society, between board members and volunteers. They're all unpaid and all very hands-on, as evidenced here in Vest Pocket Park. The 3 men I spoke with say a few people donating their time can make a huge difference. Amy Feiereisel, North Country Public Radio in downtown Saranac Lake.
We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Alan Dunham of South Glens Falls and Muskox of Ottawa. I'm David Sommerstein, North Country Public Radio.